All right, this is our third village or coffee with leadership. It's our third or fourth. Yeah, I always enjoy doing it. Amanda messages me a few days after this one and the last one, and hey, you want to do it again? Yeah, I do. I want to do as many of these as we can. So
We appreciate that.
Yeah, and I appreciate everyone showing up to this. So we'll open it up. Questions? Let's hear them. Or a statement. Oh, you have to do questions.
When's the Stagecoach restaurant opening?
What's what?
Stagecoach restaurant, when is it opening?
Late October,
Oh, no.
maybe.
Yeah.
Oh.
Push back.
But, yeah, I think they're having some issues getting some equipment and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The way this works.
They haven't had their coffee yet.
Who else? Any other not stagecoach related questions? We all know what the hot topic is, so let's get it out there. There's a public hearing tonight at 6:30 at the municipal building. I would encourage as many of you as possible to get there.
I've got one since Tim is here. Every year, Tim gets up and talks to the board about something about changing the tax arrangement. And I know, I personally finally looked at my taxes, and they were frozen back in 2011, so my taxes to the village are very small. And if they do increase whatever percent, it's not gonna be a big deal to me. I'm paying a lot of money to roads in Belton and Bell County and stuff. Tim, you always get up and say, what could the alderman take away from those of us who are seniors that would help them?
It would not take away anything
Oh.
from anyone that is already frozen.
Oh,
The village has the state limit on the homestead exemption, the highest limit that you can have for anyone with a homestead, whether you're 65 or younger, and it's a $50,000 exemption off the property value. That's for anyone that files their homestead. In addition to that, when you turn 65, we reduce your taxes by another 20% and then freeze them. And I've suggested every year that when it's possible, you need to look at lowering that exemption to be more in line with what the other communities in Bell County have. No one else has a $50,000 homestead exemption across the board. It would not affect those houses that have already been homesteaded, but it would affect new buildings. And when someone sells their house to a new resident, when they move in, they would be the ones that would feel the impact of it. And especially with Mustang Springs, in the near future of the next 5 years, there will be an incredible amount of exemptions given away. I mean, if you look at 500 homes at $50,000 each, that exemption exceeds, I'm not great with that, but I think close to $25 million of property values that could be taxed.
25 million.
Yeah. And then, for those who do turn 65, having your taxes frozen is a good thing. But a 20% reduction in the taxable in the property tax value is a dramatic cut to the village in property taxes. And I think when the appraiser gives you that, he gives you a breakdown of what you lose in property values to the 50,000 exemption and what you lose in property values to the 20% reduction in the property value of a 65-year-old.
I think the last statement that we got from Bell County on that was for the 65 and up population, it was $195,000. And there was another small percentage, which was the disabled veterans. That number was so low that it really didn't even play a factor in it. but, you know, there's a lot to be said for everything that's happening right now, and I see all the things on social media and in the paper, and, I've had conversations with Tim, and I've had conversations with some other journalists, and unfortunately, a lot of times they misquote. I'm not talking about Tim, I'm talking about other journalists that, you know, they wanna talk to me and they wanna have these conversations. And one of them even said flat out that I refused, how did they word it? That I refused to have an interview with him, and it's just not accurate. I was driving when they reached out to me, and I wasn't able to meet their deadline of 3 o'clock. And so their response was that I refused to meet with them, and I've not refused to meet with anybody that's called me, or anybody that's wanted to meet face to face. I encourage those conversations that we've done. I think we had 2 one day at City Hall, and a lot of them are at the very last minute. You know, I've got, other than what I'm doing now, I have a job I have to do, but I stop what I'm doing and I go have these conversations. And you get, you know, I never use the word misappropriation through any of this. Do I think it's mismanagement? Yes, and I reiterated that a number of times, and it was written the way that they however they wanted to drive that narrative. But Manny and I even talked about it this morning, some of the things that we're seeing on social media, and I you know, I used to be a big social media guy and kind of look and see what's going on and kind of get a feel, but I try to stay away from it now because I know in my heart what's the right thing to do, and I'm not going to allow outside influence to sway that, and I'm certainly not going to allow people chattering and bickering on Facebook to get in my head, and when I'm sleeping like a baby at night because I know that I'm doing the right thing. And this wasn't an easy thing for us to, who wants to do that 90 days in office, come in here and say, hey, here we are, we need to have a tax increase, and there's no other way around it. Nobody wants to do that. And that certainly wasn't my intent to come in here. I ran on transparency, citizen advocacy, and advocating for local business owners, and I'm doing that. And, you know, you look at prior administrations, they never had these sort of meetings. They didn't subject themselves to get up here and have these conversations, or even get out in front of all these people that we did on a Tuesday night and say, this is where we're at. Because I don't take it personally. There's not anything that anybody in this room or outside of this room can say or do that has not been said or done to me. So I'm not here for me. You can say whatever you want to say. I'm here, and I sincerely have what's in the best interest of the village at heart, and the citizens and local business owners. And that was even a comment that was made last night about doing what's best for the citizens as opposed to what's best for the village of Salado. That's one and the same as far as I'm concerned. And I think that's just I'm not gonna say what I think about that because it's probably inappropriate for this, but.
I've got a question for Manny. We have a big area covered by the library, more than the village, and they get part of our sales tax. We have a big area covered by the fire department now, and we pay taxes to them. Is there any are there places where there are big areas covered by a police department that instead of just a small village paying for the police, who are wonderful, I support them completely, but it's expensive, and they're going out on I-35 and saving lives, and that doesn't help the village at all. It's hard for them. Is there such a thing as what would it be, an ESD for police? So that we had the whole school development area paying for the police department taxes too?
The answer is yes, there are. But look at the fire department. Bell County Emergency Service Districts was adopted and approved by the voters. But it doesn't have jurisdiction other than fire suppression within the city limits, right? Which is fire prevention, fire marshal duty. So the village is currently entertaining, or at least negotiating an agreement. It's already been provided in interlocal agreement to the ESD. They've responded with some comments. We're reviewing it. I'll need to get make some changes to our current ordinances to make it applicable. But so their district is much larger in their 10 cents, just like the library district is created by voters. It has its district, and so does the city limits. So the police department, can contract for outside with entities if it wants to. But our city police not only provide services within city limits, but they also neighboring. They have agreements with Bell County sheriff's office, they'll respond, so. But when we've asked for assistance here recently, we had somebody pull a weapon, a gun, out on family members, and police officers were present, the chief and another officer. We asked for Bell County Sheriff's Office to respond, and that was almost like a 20-minute response time. So when you start looking at these, our police officers, you have more officers on per capita within the village, because my assumption is that you want public safety. You want that response, right? So when you start reducing those services, or you start not being able to compensate fairly to keep them, then you have high turnover, or you don't have enough institutional knowledge, or you're more prone to find officers that can't keep jobs, right? So I think the village has done a good job at establishing a city police, and a police district is just another taxing entity, right? So there are cities that incorporate their own fire departments because it's cheaper than having an ESD. It's only dependent on its city limits. So Bell County and the ESD, there's a board of directors, and most likely appointed by if not the Commissioners Court, they're elected. I don't know how that was structured. But Bell County has responsibility to provide fire suppression out in the county. And what they generally do is when they don't have an ESD in the area, they contract with the city. There's an ESD district. For example, Temple or Killeen may respond outside of the city limits, but they're compensated by the county government. Okay?
And, are you done with that?
Yes, sir.
That's another taxing entity. If you can have ESDs for fire, you can have them for medical, you can have them for police if you want to, but, I mean, I don't know that I want more government involved in what I have going on, and that's just another taxing entity. So, all you're doing is shifting your payroll from a municipal budget to a tax budget. You're still paying the same amount, you're just paying it to a different entity. Yes, sir.
I hate to show my age, but would you guys please speak up just a little louder?
Oh, sure.
My
Yeah.
hearing aids aren't doing real good. Thank you.
In the emergency services district, I don't think it's a bad idea. I think doing that for the purposes of law enforcement protection, I think would not be the way that we wanna go. I think, by law, the ESD, the highest rate they can go for the ad valorem tax is 10 cents per $100 evaluation. So that's never gonna go any higher than 10 cents. I think they're currently at 9. And they started it out that way for a reason. And I believe that as time goes on and we continue to get more rooftops and commercial development, then I would hope that tax rate would roll back to a lower tax rate. They can get the same, kind of the no new revenue. They can get the same amount of money out of a lower tax rate. So I'm hoping that that's what happens in the future. But that's not something that we're looking at right now as far as PD goes. The question is not can we afford the police department that we have? The question really is, can we afford to not have them? And to his point, we just had a situation with an armed person that could have very easily gone south. But one of the officers that were on scene had just went through hostage negotiation training. Even though this wasn't a hostage situation, that training and that mindset certainly helped them get through that situation and ended on a note that didn't involve worst case scenarios, and they got the mental help that they needed. There's other situations that happened. We had one of our female police officers was on duty by herself, called for backup, and it was a 25-minute response time. When you're calling for backup as a police officer because somebody's being non-compliant, and you got a 25-minute wait, that's an eternity. I mean, we can sit here right now for 25 minutes in silence, and let's see how long you think that. And if you got something going on, something bad, that makes it seem like it's even longer. And it takes a split second for somebody's life to end because somebody didn't comply, didn't do what they were supposed to do, and on both sides of that, the good guy or the bad guy. So I stand by these numbers for PD. I think it's what we need going forward as we continue to grow. We don't just have, not just in the village now. They do respond to things on the interstate, to Linda's point, but they're not running the radar on the interstate. They do have to respond to accidents and things of that nature. And I'm glad they did. We've got, 2 officers that have been issued, life-saving awards in the last, since January. I'm very proud of our police department, and I would hope that y'all would be too. Yes, sir.
Do we have mutual aid agreements with the sheriff's department to respond?
We do under certain circumstances. It's not,
It's an automatic aid.
yeah. We do with the sheriff's department on certain situations depending on what it is. But again, if they're not already on their way, you may only have 5 deputies at any given time in the entire county.
Yeah,
And
I
they may
just
be
looked
coming.
up, our county is 1,000 square miles.
Yeah.
So
And of that.
each of those guys are covering about 200 square miles.
Yeah. So, and if we have something happening here, and there's also something that's bigger happening in, Colleen or wherever, they gotta break away from that and then come here to respond to that. So you're looking at a very lengthy response time. And we do have an agreement with, Belton as well. They can call and Belton will come and help them whenever they can, and that happens. I don't know of any situation where Gerald has come to help, but, Bell County and Belton PD for sure. And we have a couple of Temple police officers that live here in Salado, and they've rolled up on situations and stopped to help as well, so. Who's next?
You got an easy group today.
Nobody else has anything? Come on. Amanda, give me something.
You wanna address the over projecting or under projecting?
Yeah, so, and Manny and I have been talking about this for a while. We talked about it again this morning, and you see these comments again on social media about us not properly projecting our revenue streams. The difference is, and Manny put this together and our accountant, and we had these conversations. We were not, in the past, it's been, a method of just a sophisticated guess of what kind of revenue to expect, and I think those have been grossly over projected. And historically, that's the case. The projections that we have as far as revenue streams, tax revenue and things of that nature are realistic numbers based on historical data, not throwing darts at a board and seeing where the dart lands. These are numbers that are attainable, things that we know is gonna come in, and they were very conservatively projected. I'm hopeful, and I'm not gonna speak for Manny, but I would imagine he is too, that those numbers are gonna come in better than what we anticipate. But we're not gonna put these numbers on here and elevate these numbers like they've been done in the past. And some of them were just a gross misinterpretation of what the projected revenue was. And
I
we're just
noticed the
not gonna do that.
franchise fees were all inflated apparently in the past by
Yeah.
Don and Mike Coffe and the budget. The franchise fees were all down, and I thought we're getting more people to pay franchise fees, so they must have been inflated in the past to make it look like we were getting more money in, yeah.
Or not making it look like we were going to, but projecting that we would get more money in.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's a responsible way to do it.
I think chiefly on the franchise fees, it's the fact that nobody has a landline anymore.
Exactly.
And when
yeah.
they were, when that number was first adopted, and I don't think it was ever decreased,
Yeah.
it didn't take into the account that landlines are going away, and I don't think anyone pays a franchise fee on our cell phones, do we?
Yes, you do.
Do we pay?
Cable,
Yes, sir, there is. Yeah, and as a matter of fact,
water.
the Board of Aldermen voted down a municipal right-of-way because a lot of these, even cellular phones have, communication lines that they run on course power posts. So about 2 or 3 months ago, we voted down a municipal, right-of-way, Communications Act, which is paid through telephone bills or cellular, but it was voted down. I recommended that we not leave any money on the table because it's just a tax that, and it was roughly like 2% of a phone bill, which was like 4 cents that was gonna be added. So, and again, it's a decision of the Board of Aldermen. I make a recommendation, they vote on it, and I notify them that we were gonna stay with the 2023 rates. I don't know what they did, the prior year. So, but these projections, you know, when we look, you know, we had a conversation, the mayor said, and with Mustang Springs, my question is what's your development timeline? What are you looking at? Is it 7 years maximum? Worst case, 10. Okay. For example, when COVID hit in March of 2020, I had developments that were well on the way that pretty much stalled for over a year and a half, not 2 full years. So something like that will certainly delay a project. You know, nobody really likes the sanctuary agreement. It goes back to 2015, it's been modified. But here we are sometime in 2023, it really took off. If you were over projecting those items, well then it just didn't occur, okay? We have a development, and I'm not gonna call it out, but we have a development that is a 3-phase development. I mean, phase 2 just got completed, and I'm realizing that we actually have infrastructure that was dedicated to us. I don't have dedication instruments. If there's a lift station built, I went to go take photos of it at 7:30 this morning. It's got a generator, it's got propane tank. Now I gotta match it up to see if I'm even insuring it, whether it's on my schedule. I mean, all of these things, so these are unknown costs. So when I look to project your revenue stream, I don't even know what your true expenses are, or these anomalies. So I had somebody at the last meeting said, hey, I think your revenue streams are under projected. You're right, I do, the way I have traditionally done, I've been doing these kind of budgets for well over almost 20 years. And certainly historically from my last employer for 7.5 years, 6 of those budgets were mine. I left in the third quarter of 2023, completed the third quarter. They had an interim for 30 days and the city secretary, another interim for the other 60 days, so that was my budget. And it ended with a little over $1 million, like $1.2 million in reserves that got added to the 14 million that I had already had generated. I didn't generate all 14 million. I did generate 11 million. When I started in 2016, they had a $3 million. That city had its budget, aggregate budget, it's a little over $40 million. But I built up the reserves. The reason you build up reserves is so that you can leverage them with grants and you get a better bond rating. So when we were entering projects, I just had a conversation with former mayor last night, and he says, how are these, he called me, because he's ill, and I found out he wasn't doing well. So I sent him a message, he calls me and he goes, hey, how are they now spending all that money? He said, Mayor, they're depleting your reserves. I said, do you remember Cameron County Regional Mobility Authority, those roadways, Williams North and Williams South? You're not gonna be able to pay them in the future. He goes, well, no wonder we're spending so much money. I said, you're about to deplete all of your funds, and good luck. It took me years to build them. And the reason being is we had agreements with the 5th largest MPO in the state. Was created with the merger of the Harlingen San Benito MPO, the Hidalgo County MPO, and the City of Brownsville's MPO. We merged all 3 MPOs, created the 5th largest in the state, so we could go after federal funds through the state. So when you're building these funds, these reserves, it is not because we want to save them. It is because you're trying to put the city in a better position so it can finance its future projects and well into the next 20, 30 years. And I mentioned that when I got hired, that you're not looking into the future. So, you know, nobody likes to pay taxes. I don't like it. I don't live too far from here, but I pay a lot in taxes. So, and I know what you pay, and I see this. And we do need to protect our elderly, our over 65, our homeowners, but every time you give an exemption, that's less money's coming in. Somebody's gotta make up the difference. But if you don't poise yourself to be able to handle unknowns or problems, you're just gonna be financially bankrupt. Means you're not gonna be able to pay for things. And it will cost you more in the long run. So, look, the citizens will decide whatever they decide. If a petition comes in, it comes in. If it doesn't, we'll deal with it at that time. But you know, the mayor's indicated public safety is important because you think it's important, and you've supported that over the years. But the city also just doesn't provide police services. You may not believe it, but the city actually provides contract management. Everything that it does is handled by city staff, something, and you've got a lot of developments. So all of the ranchers and I saw many of the agreements going back to 2011, when a lot of the large acreage tracts that were voluntarily annexed into the village. That tells me that it didn't want to either go into Killeen, Belton, Harper Heights. It wanted to be in Salado. Well, if you don't help Salado at least position itself to be able to manage those growth, then if this village doesn't exist, those CTJs don't exist. Right? So you're kind of, you know, what's your reality? Where do you really want to be? But if you're gonna grow, you know, the I-35 corridor will continue to see growth, and it's been coming up, you know, north of San Antonio, all the way to Waco, and even beyond to Dallas, right? It's getting up to Hillsboro, and it's gonna continue. So, the corridor that you're in right now, between us and Waco, it's getting a lot of, you know, you're gonna have a lot of out-of-state folks moving in the area. The cost of living is certainly better. I mean, Texas provides opportunities. It's a pro-development state. It's a property rights state, right? So quite honestly, when we try to hamper development, there are state statutes that actually protect it, because if we don't act in a timely manner, then you didn't meet the timeline and that development gets to move forward. So you need staff. So even though some people may believe that you don't need enough city staff, it's not necessarily true. You need competent staff to be able to look at the issues and to make sure that they are advising the governing body of what the options are. And that's how we make decisions. That's because they need to make informed decisions, and it is incumbent upon management and staff to provide that information. Town hall meetings, public hearings, public comments, they're all important. This is your community. We can only put those plans together. And at the end of the day, this is a council mayor form of government. Your mayor's the chief executive. He gives me direction. So does the rest of the board of aldermen. The mayor doesn't adopt the budget. It's with the consent of his colleagues. But he's in the driver's seat.
Can you talk a little bit
Yes,
about
ma'am.
electricity? Long ago, the shops in town could band together and get a deal on electricity, and that sort of disappeared at one point. But, I, for instance, live on Mill Creek Drive, and it's black as can be at night, unless my neighbors turn on their lights, outdoor lights. Will you tell us, are we paying the electric light bill for the lights in Mustang Springs, Sanctuary, Eagle Heights, and what's the bird? Drake's Landing. Are we paying the electric bill for their lights on their streets? I know somebody mentioned over at Eagle Heights, they've got a pool over there and it's lit up like the 4th of July every night. Is the town paying, and I know before you guys came, they signed contracts. Do you know for sure who we're paying electric lights for outside of the main village?
I do know that we're paying for Drake's Landing, because that was the first contract that I saw from Encore. I was trying to determine why I needed to approve their lighting pattern, because I'm just going, why aren't you following the ordinance? So their response was, well, developers tend to change the requirements and before we install them at our cost, but the city pays the light bill. I wanted to make sure you were aware of it. I said, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And we heard the developer say that at the meeting. It is very typical for developments to pay for the street lights, not the lights around a pool house or clubhouse, but the street lights. It is. The standards that are there for the street lights are very, they're very simple. Cul-de-sacs, at the corners, intersections. I mean, they're not spaced out, like every 200 linear feet, that they go from one side to the other, I mean zigzag, I mean, it does, we don't have that type of an ordinance. It is a very simple layout, okay? So Mustang Springs, I can't answer that one because their agreement, actually, the way it was negotiated, they pay for a lot of their own maintenance. I'll have to look at that very specifically. Sanctuary, you do pay for it. The developer pays for the upgraded street light. But once that infrastructure along with the roadway, and that's accepted by the village, if a vehicle takes out that street light, we're responsible for replacing it. Right, at that, so it is a much more expensive, so that's what was negotiated, that's what's in the agreement. So I can tell you that yes, because my position was, if it gets damaged, where do I get it from? Because Encore doesn't provide it. So yeah, it's gonna be a challenge in the future, but we do own them, we do pay that light bill.
And Eagle Heights too.
Eagle Heights, I didn't see it in the agreement, I don't recall, the agreement certainly wasn't the 3-inch binder that I have for the sanctuary, okay? But I would say that those lights went in, and they are the cities, I mean, typically they would have been anyway. I didn't see anything unique, they're pretty standard lights. So let me just put a disclaimer, I don't know what's in that agreement. And the reason I do go through those agreements, Mrs. Reynolds, is so I can determine exactly what our obligations are and, how do we get to where we're at and why we're fees waived, right?
And you pay the village light bill for the offices and all. Is there any chance that businesses in town could join with you? I mean, it's like somebody who's talking with the governor told me our light bills are gonna go down, but the money we pay per watt is gonna drop significantly because they've done something in Austin with batteries or whatever, that's what he was telling me. So I hesitated to sign a long-term lease. But if you have a business in town, I know they get commercial rates, but is there any chance it could become a conglomerate where businesses might also get a deal? And whether you own the building or you're paying rent, you're paying your electricity, you're paying your air conditioning and whatnot. Is there any chance that the village could connect with all the businesses?
That's a conversation we would have to have with Encore. I mean, every utility company has their own rebate programs and items like that. I mean, if you were a business owner and you made certain improvements, just like if the village wanted to make improvements to its upgrade to the LED lighting, more efficient lighting, there are programs for those rebates that, because we're considered a business also, that we can have. But as in totality, I'm not familiar with that program.
A couple of years ago, or at least a year back, there was a discussion of road impact fees, both inside the city limits and in the ETJ. And then all that discussion just fell by the wayside. New subdivisions have an impact on our existing roads. Is that something that this board would pursue?
100%, and it has been discussed. That was one of the main.
I mean, it was, the last time it was on an official agenda, I think has been over a year.
Yeah.
It was discussed a little bit and then,
I
as
think I
has
do
quite
remember
often
that.
happened in the past, nothing ever happened.
Yeah, I remember it being discussed, and it basically died after that. We've had more conversations about it. I think the current board is in favor of situations like that. Why would we, if they, I've said it here, I think, in these meetings, and also I've said it in public meetings. I'm not, if developers wanna come in here and they wanna build, they can pay to come here, and if not, they can move aside, cause somebody right behind them will. And we're seeing that. We're in conversations with some folks right now that, they wanna tie into the sewer, and they're willing to run the infrastructure to their development, and if we need to increase the capacity of the wastewater treatment plant, they're willing to pay to do that too. So you got folks that got deep pockets that wanna come in here, and if they wanna do it, sure, but we're gonna make it, these agreements, the citizens and the local business owners here are not continuing to pay for the sins of the past. And it put this on the new folks that are coming here. They wanna come here, they can certainly pay those bills. Cause to your point, they are gonna impact it. Once this whole Swan Ranch thing kicks off and you talk about additional 14,000 homes, I mean, do the math on using the Census Bureau's numbers at 2.7 people per household, 2 vehicle households. So 14,000 you're looking at to save us another 28,000 cars. But I think it'll be more than that. If you're looking at really 3 vehicle households, because you got, some teenager that's 16 years old just got their vehicle, got their driver's license, and those vehicles are gonna impact our roadways. And anything that we can do to take the burden off the taxpayers here, and that'll be well after I'm gone and moved on to whatever else I decide to do in the future, and probably after Manny too, but I don't know how long it's gonna be for those, but we're looking at, when we have these conversations, this is not something that happens in 6 months. It's a year or 2 years out. Even if we sign the contract today, or sign that agreement today, look at another year, 2 years, 3 years before you ever even see any tax revenue off any of that. But yeah, we do support the impact fees.
Is there any support to taking over Main Street? I hope not.
Not from me.
Tech stop. I think that would be financially disastrous to the village to be responsible for that. And I think Tech Stop should continue to be responsible for this because they put that exit directly on the Main Street.
Yeah.
Which anytime there's an accident on the highway, we get the 18-wheelers coming up. Particularly if we don't have enough police officers to keep them from taking this exit on the north side.
And I can remember in years past, we've even gotten when I was on the fire department, PD would call us and ask for help. And we'd come over here and block these roads so that people on the interstate couldn't get off and clog up our roads.
Right.
Because the interstate was shut down. I think I'd like to see us to go back to that way of thinking, keep them off of Main Street. We had a fatality accident on I-35. I didn't know anything about it at the time. And I was trying to get from my house to Drake's Landing. And it took me 25 minutes to get from my house to Drake's Landing. Because I was in the front of the roads stopped up. I'm gonna hit West Village Road. That was even worse. And I only knew at that point that it was a fatality because I saw Judge Coleman come blowing by me. So then I knew that's what it was. So yeah, them getting off the interstate, it just creates more of a problem for us. And when it gets to the point that when you're coming back from Drake's Landing, I guess traffic was routed through whatever Little River Academy coming up, because coming up Royal Street, I had to wait. There was traffic coming up Royal Street to get into Salado. So it probably took me another 15, 20 minutes to get back home after leaving Drake's Landing.
Town Hall night, that last town hall,
Yeah.
they were diverting traffic. It was bumper to bumper all the way through
Oh, yeah.
town.
That was one of those belly dump trailers full of rock
Yeah,
dumped on the interstate.
you couldn't even hardly get to
No.
Town Hall.
So they had TxDOT out there cleaning it up, and we weren't working that scene, thankfully, but DPS was out there.
So let me let you kind of figure what we're doing. Our new planner, Gina Pence, is in the room. We did meet with the area manager, Michael Yates, with the TxDOT out of the Belton office. We discussed Main Street, we discussed a lot of I-35 and those kind of issues and expectations from TxDOT. So, and we're reaching a new municipal maintenance agreement with TxDOT only because we've annexed FM 2843 out to Mustang Springs, 2260 out, east somewhere by Shepherd Drive. We've extended I-35's annexation down to the rest stop area, so we needed to update our agreement with the state, with TxDOT specifically. But, the accusations by some of the developers that are local are saying, hey, you're changing the rules on us. No, we're enforcing the ordinances that have been around since about 2002, 2009, 2015. You just haven't been following. Oh, nobody told us. Well, every one of these developers has engineers, surveyors, and they know. They've just been taking advantage of you. Okay? they're educated, they're consultants, but they certainly know how city governments operate. So we're not changing the rules, we're just enforcing the rules. As we go through these regulations that are adopted by city ordinance, adopted by your city leaders, I'm improving them. Some things have, some loopholes in it that I wanna close up. The mayor heard the other day, we heard, hey, this map doesn't show that, I really need to pay your impact fees. Yeah, but that annexation ordinance says that, you came into the village and you requested the service. And we have we have 6 ordinances that addresses the sanitary sewer infrastructure. You gotta read all 6 of them, okay? So, not a very good argument, but it was certainly an argument, so you know what? I'm gonna correct that. So you'll see an ordinance next week that's on the agenda, that just went out, it says, if you make an annexation, if you want the city's sanitary sewer, forget the certificated area. If you just want the city sewer system, city sewer connection, you must annex, whether you're wholly or fully in the city, or so that will certainly close up that argument. Because here's what the misconception is from this developer. He thinks, well, you have a certificate area and I'm not in it. Cities aren't required to have certificated areas. We're exempt for those. We do it to keep encroachments from other entities, but we're not required to have it. And since we have it within the city limits and you want it, our citizens are paying for it, or those that are using it, if you want it, there's an ordinance, it's a 1-page ordinance that says, if you want it, you annex. It can't be any simpler. So those are the kind of conversations that we're having, and that's what it takes, is for us to go back through our ordinances, update them, and close those discussion points. They think it's negotiable, sometimes it's not.
So the village never got a CNN?
It does have a certificate area, but every time you annex a portion of land,
You have to change it.
you need to update it. Well, that's costly, because you've gotta get the maps updated, that's engineering expense, you gotta get an ordinance,
So
you
the
gotta.
developer should pay for that.
Pardon me?
So the developer should pay for that.
Well, it should be covered, so, and Ms. Pinson certainly, she's already making enemies, because she's already sending a lot of bills out to developers. But look, we lose leverage when we sign off on a plat. We now have to go to civil court, try to collect for bad management practices. So sometimes we have to weigh those options. What do we recommend? Do we pursue legal action, cut our losses, or regroup, right? I can't fix what happened last year, or 2 years, or 5 years ago. I am going back to about October, and those that we can collect, we're upsetting a few folks. They're local. The mayor may not get reelected, and I may not get my contract renewed. But this is business for us. So we try to do what's the right thing. We follow your ordinances. It's nothing personal. They're just regulations, not any different than every one of you that has a company or works for a company. There's always regulations somewhere. So we try to follow those, and we try to improve it. So our job is to make those improvements or make those recommendations for the Board of Aldermen to adopt. And we also don't want to hold up development if it's a good development. And if it's not so good, then we will make those recommendations. But that won't cause a development that won't occur outside of your city limits. My concern was, and I use this analogy, on FM 2268, a lot of it south of us is not within the city limits, within the village. They may be in the ETJ. They can certainly petition to come out of the city's ETJ. So you can have a concrete badge right across the roadway from you, and if you live anywhere near that southern boundary, good luck. There's a reason cities have these ETJs, and it adopts them by state statute with every annexation to protect peripherally the boundaries of the community, so you don't have bad development near you. It protects your property values. All right, but the legislature thought it right to allow landowners to petition to get out. And you have to meet that criteria. Everybody thinks that they qualify, and that is not necessarily true either. If he voluntarily came into the ETJ, he can't voluntarily go out. right? So you gotta look at these kind of things, you know, so it is not always a gift and it's not always what you think it is. So we look at these things and these are time consuming. We get detracted on every morning we walk in thinking that we've got our work set out for that day. By the time 8:30 comes around, we realize that we're on a tangent because we got new issues to resolve for that day. But we are certainly trying to protect your best interests by enforcing the ordinances that have been long adopted. They're industry standards. There's nothing I've come across that is not an industry standard. What isn't an industry standard is the management of those ordinances. And we're trying to be more financially accountable because and I believe this, developments should never be a burden on property owners, on residential property owners. So how we run the city in the future will certainly depend on how a lot of this lays out for the future. And again, what do you as a community want? And you decide by telling your elected officials, or if not, you tell them on election day, and then we get the message.
What about the water for those developments?
That's really not, that's nothing that we have any control over.
No.
We don't own, Toledo doesn't have city water, it's Toledo Water Supply Corporation. If they wanna come in here, Mustang Springs is dealing with it. They have to go through a process with Clearwater Underground Water Conservation District. They sit down and they have their meetings and they decide. They can give them a permit for a test well, and then either it passes or it doesn't, and then they move the whole process. It's not something that we have any control over. We don't, even with Toledo Water Supply Corporation, we don't have any control over that. We have no say-so whatsoever. We have a good working relationship with them, but at the end of the day, it's theirs. And we're not, I'm not a big fan of government interjecting where they don't need to be.
Do you know the update on, I know it's not y'all's, but what's the current update? That's the big social media news right now.
Yeah, they just changed it again, I think either from chlorine back to chloramine or vice versa. And I've had multiple conversations with property owners out South Shore, those sort of things. And for those that saw, it was either there at the last Board of Alderman meeting or saw it on our YouTube channel. Somebody brought some water from South Shore, and I asked her to bring it to me, and I took a big swig of it in the public meeting. I saw the numbers. I saw that it's water you can drink. It's okay to drink. It didn't smell great, it didn't look great, and it tasted even worse. But to prove a point, and they asked me, "Do you trust the numbers?" I said, "Yeah, bring me the water." And it was a mason jar. Thought Manny was gonna fall out of his chair. But I just opened it up and took a drink of it. And it didn't, like I said, it didn't taste the greatest, but I've had worse. And it's, the easiest way that I know to describe it is, and if you've driven across the dam, when the weather starts to drop, you can smell it when you come across the dam.
Yeah.
And as you get closer in the fall into the winter months where the temperature's starting to drop, the lake turns. So that's what's happening now. You get all this water runoff, and it was, historic numbers, however many feet of water that ran off into the lakes in a matter of a week and a half, 2 weeks. It hadn't happened before. And the manganese levels are high. And I've spoken more about manganese over the last 3 weeks than I've ever in my life. That's found in dirt. We all are around the same age demographic here. We ate dirt as kids. We're, aside from a twitch every now and then, we're okay. All that manganese washed off into the lake. I'm a scuba diver. I've been over there and I see the result of all that water that comes in there, and I go dive there and I see it as the temperature starts to drop. You see a difference in the clarity of the water. And that's what we're seeing now. That's what's calling it. And speaking with Ricky Preston at Toledo Water Supply Corporation and listening to their presentations on that and having those conversations, I agree. It's going to be after the temperature starts to drop and the lake turns. And when it does, that's when we're going to start seeing some clarity. They can put all the chemicals in it that they want to right now, but you're not going to fight Mother Nature. Wait for a hurricane to come in along the Gulf Coast and stand out there with a shield and see if you can stop that surge from coming in. You're not going to stop it. And you're not gonna stop the way that the lake is. You can go out there and put whatever dyes you want in there or whatever, it's not gonna clear it up. When the weather starts to turn and the temperature starts to come down, you will see a difference. I've seen it from an underneath the water perspective. I've seen it happen, and I know that's what's coming, that's what it's gonna take. And that's my only opinion I have on that.
Yeah, so let me tell you about water supply corporations. They're nonprofits, they're regulated by the Public Water Supply System, so TCQ has jurisdiction over them. There are also, water companies that buy systems. The way Mustang Springs was negotiated is, that water system is privately owned by the developer. He can sell that system to a company for profit. So, and the company that runs it may be a for-profit, okay? Which means that they fall under a different set, they still have the same environmental regulations, but how they have to, calculate their water rates can be different, okay? They don't have the same, requirements that nonprofits or governmental entities do. So, that's the concern when you're in those areas, so that's the way that was certainly negotiated. Along FM 2268, there are conversations about bringing water from Prairie Dale through the Gerald Schwartner Water Supply Corporation. There's conversations about reactivating some of the wells that were on site. There had, for example, people think that just because it's the Salado Water Supply Corporation's certificated area, that another water company can't go in there. That is not a true statement. The state allows for duly certified areas. And then the customer gets to decide which water source you want from, okay? So, again, it's an education process. You can have them overlapping, they can certainly cross, they can put in their infrastructure in public right-of-ways with authorization. If not, they're subject, if not, they acquire their own utility easements for their infrastructure. So, one of the, and I've heard early on, well, we're not in the water sewer business. And the mayor and I just had this conversation last week. I said, but you are.
Mm-hmm.
The moment you accepted the wastewater system from Sanctuary by agreement, you got in the water and wastewater business. You now follow the same regulations the Public Utility Commission of Texas has, TCQ requires, and you will see those penalties hit you when you don't comply. So, so the idea that the village is not in the water and sewer business is not a true statement. We are. It's a limited size, and it should be self-sustaining. It should not be funded through the general fund. So, I know the reasoning, and it makes sense, and many communities do what we've done in the past, but it should not be perpetual. It needs to get resolved. So I'm hoping that we can do that. But again, to say whether we are today we're not in the potable water business. That doesn't mean we won't be in the future. That doesn't mean that we will operate it. We can certainly do what other cities do, but how we handle those things will be discussions on how the city wants to manage its growth. Thank you. Are we almost done?
Yeah. Does anyone have any more questions?
No, I'll just add one more thing. I spoke earlier about transparency and citizen advocacy and advocacy for business owners, but also ran on accountability for village government. And last year, when I was on the board of aldermen, as an alderman, I did that, and I think that I proved that what I said I was going to do, I did, and I'm going to continue to do that. I'm not here. There's nobody's getting to have any secret meetings or any, just me and Manny having a conversation. If I know about something, the rest of the board knows it. If Manny knows something about it, he almost to the point where he overly shares information, things that we don't necessarily need to know, because we trust him and he has the authority to do it. But and I didn't ask him to do it, but he does it anyway. If he knows something and he gets some correspondence come across, we get copied on it. We know what's happening. We know what discussions are out there. In the past, that hasn't been the case. So we're all very well read into these situations that are happening in and around us, because Manny informs us. And if it's something of any significance, he picks up the phone and says, "Hey, I need you to come up here to City Hall. Let's have a conversation." And we do. We're gonna have another one here in a little bit. And so, you got the right people in place up there. It's just, this is not gonna fix itself overnight. It's not gonna do it in 6 months. It's not gonna be an immediate thing. It took a lot of years to get to where we're at. I don't know that it'll take that many years to fix it, but it is gonna take some time. So just, one thing I can say is just hang in there. To his statement about, well, Mayor, if you wanna get reelected, I don't care about any of that. I didn't run for office to get reelected. I ran for office because I saw some opportunities to correct some things and to address some issues, and I'm doing that. And if I decide I'm gonna run again and people, they don't want me in there, it's okay. That's the whole beauty of democracy and having that freedom to go out there and cast your vote. During both campaigns, I don't tell anybody to vote for me. I said, go vote, regardless of who you vote for. If I'm not the right guy for the job, okay. But I'm here now, and I'm doing what I think is best. And that's all there is to it. I'm not doing anything outside the norm. I have conversations with people, I ask them. And for these type of things, public hearings, public comments, we increase public comments from 3 to 5 minutes because I genuinely want to hear what people have to say. And if they don't show up and they don't give me their input, then I'm just left to assume. But I try to take a very common sense approach because I also live here.
But I want my contract reviewed.
He wants his contract renewed, yeah. So just know, we these decisions, the things that are on here in this proposed budget and everything, and that's the hot topic besides the water. It's not something that we did, that we ever wanted to do. It's not something that we anticipated we were gonna have to do, but it's a necessary evil. So I appreciate y'all coming here. I do enjoy these. I'm hoping next month, you probably need to put a little extra something in the coffee so they'll talk some more.
Thank you.
No, you're putting out good info, so they're good.
All right. Anything else?
Thank y'all for coming.
Thank y'all.
Grab some coffee.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Yes, sir. I should, yeah.
Ruby, can you come take a picture actually? Amanda. Oh, I love your shirt.
That was
Oh, okay. What? Come over here for a quick photo. Just away from the table.
Okay.
Yeah. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you. Is it still going? I don't know. Did you hit it? Yeah.